All right, so welcome everybody to the whole internet. I think there's a few of you that are jumping in, and I'm excited. So I had a little baby when I made the announcement about this that I put on Facebook and on LinkedIn. That's my third, and he got ready for bed, so we did the bath, the bed, the books, and everything. And that's what I want to talk about in this video. I want to keep it about 20 minutes, pretty short, but I've been reading this. This is The Power of Story by Jim Loehr. I think my video might be reversed, so sorry if you can't read that. It's a good book, and there's a lot of really good insights in there, and it's great for building a business, especially when you're building a business with a family. I recently read some articles about mompreneurs, right? Moms that are building a business on their side. On the side of course, on top of everything else that they're doing. And being able to communicate through story is a big help to anyone who's trying to advance their career or to manage a business while they're also growing a family. And so great skills to know. The best way that I think I can teach this, though, is by just demonstrating the power of story with a story. So I'm going to go ahead and share something here. I should have had it on the right screen. I'm sorry. Let me hide it just down to here, and I'll make me big enough that you can still kind of see. So hopefully you're able to see me while I'm talking here. I want to talk about Ernest Hemingway. Hemingway was a writer in the early 1900s, and he was notorious for writing short stories, was really, really good at it. And apparently he was also kind of a drinker, and he was, was not one to back down from a challenge. So here he is, he's at the pub with some of his buddies. They're all intellectuals, they're all smart, they like to do whatever they do. And one of them comes up with a challenge to see who can write the shortest story and make it good. And so, not to be outdone, Hemingway here, he grabs a napkin, and he writes down these 6 words. And this is what he writes: for sale, baby shoes, never worn. I don't know if you can feel that. To me, this is so cool because it's just 6 words on a piece of paper, right? The people that he's making up are fictional. The characters, the baby that apparently wasn't born, the parents that apparently were excited and loving. Maybe they were so poor that they had to sell the shoes, or maybe it was too painful for them, and so they had to, kind of cut bait with the memory of it to help them get through the mourning process. I don't know, but your mind goes crazy, and you could feel that emotional response, right? You could feel, whoa, it kind of hits you, and that's exactly what a good story can do. You see, we've been operating as humans, we've been operating in story mode. This book talks about that for a long time. And it seems to be the way that we pass down information. And let me jump back into here for a minute. It seems to be the way that we pass down information, and it seems to be a very effective means to doing that. And so I want to talk about today, I'm going to practice this, and you can help me by giving me feedback and helping me get better at this. I want to be concise. I don't think I'll be quite as good as Hemingway was. Hemingway had this philosophy. He called it the iceberg method. In other words, it was just the tip, just kind of enough to tease and get the mind to go. And you could see that demonstrated in those 6 words. Sorry, by the way, if you hear a lot of noise. There's a thunderstorm outside right now, and the house is kind of reacting to that. So I apologize for any noise. Let me tell you this story about DNA activation. I'll grab this. This was really what this story has meant for me. It's been a little business that I've ran, and for the first time in my life, we got to go to Disneyland. And so there's my little family caricatured. I'm still kind of bothered that they put the line of baldness right there next to my head. I guess it's representative. But this has been a great little business for me. And really what I do to run the business is I tell the story. Because it's a new technology, nobody knows what it is. that's the value that I bring, is that I educate the market about it. And the better that I can get at doing that, the more impact I can have. And it's a great way for me to grow this side business and help my family. So again, if you can help me get better at teaching and sharing this story, that would be awesome. So let me jump right into it. First, I want to talk not about DNA, not about DNA activation at all, but about steak dinners. Because my wife, a couple of years ago, my wife wanted to go out to this fancy restaurant, a really fancy steakhouse. And we knew it was like out of our budget, but we figured, we'd splurge this once. And if we really liked it, then we would go back, every 6 months or so when we could afford it. And I'm going to tie this into DNA in a little while. So hang tight. Anyway, we're at this restaurant. We show up, we walk in, it looks super fancy. Let me go back to my screen share here. It looks super fancy. So it's kind of like this, right? I don't know, I can zoom that in more. Not that it wasn't this one, but it was like that kind of quality. It was this awe-inspiring fancy restaurant. We get seated, and you're not allowed just to go back into the kitchen and have things done just the way you want or the way you like. You have to interact with the kitchen through a waiter or a waitress. And in this case, we had a waiter. So the waiter comes over, and he hi, my name is blah, 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 whatever, welcome. Have you been here before? Here's the specials. Can I get you started with drinks, etc. He goes through the normal thing, comes back with our appetizer or drinks or whatever it was. And then he asks if we're ready to order. And my wife, she tells him that she wants to order just the steak that she wants. She gives. I'm wondering if I can pin myself here. Hold on just a second. Let me see if I can pin me so that I don't have other people that are. We're getting more people jumping online right now. That's exciting. So welcome. I've got everybody muted as you come in, so I hope you're not offended by being muted. I know some of you guys are loud. I'm telling a story right now about steakhouses. So my wife and I, we show up. He comes and gets her order, and she orders just the steak she wants and just the way she wants it. And what does the waiter do? Right? He takes that little piece of paper out and scribbles down whatever he has in waiterese, so he can take it back to the kitchen and get the thing ordered the way that it is, get it produced. Then he looks at me, and I order just the steak that I want, just the way that I want it. But as he's writing, I get overruled. My wife, she's from the South. She's from Arkansas. And they're big on how they cook their food down there. So she's the authority, right? And she's like, oh, hey, babe, this is a nice restaurant. You can't order food like that here. Like you're going to ruin it. You're going to ruin it. So you've got to order it this way. And trust me, you'll like it way better. Like this is good meat. This is a good place. So just do it this way. So anyway, I give in, I succumb to it. She hijacks my order, takes it over, overrules me. And you fast forward a little bit, they bring out the steak. My wife loves hers, just, pure happiness. And I cut into this thing a little bit and take a couple bites, and it's just not working for me at this steakhouse. And I probably could have had it sent back. I'm sure I could have done other things, but at the time, I'm just sitting there and I'm looking at this thing that I'm convinced is still alive, this big old lump of meat. And I know I've paid like $60 for this thing. Again, way too expensive, but it just kind of ruined my day, right? And that is the exact same way that our bodies work. Not that we're all lumps of meat ruining other people's days, but the way that a restaurant is set up is really the same way that the building blocks of our bodies are set up. And we've just identified now some interesting ways to signal that and to control that so that we don't get something that we don't want out of the kitchen. So let me give a quick example of what I mean by that. This is, let me just drag this one over for a minute. We'll leave that guy there for now. So this is, this is how the steakhouse works and how a cell works. So your cells are the building blocks of your body. That looks creepy to have that other guy's head right behind me. So I'm going to move me over a little bit. The cells are the building blocks of the body. So your body is made up of all these systems, the respiratory system, the nervous system, all these different systems. Those are made up of organs and tissues, and it gets all the way down to the cell. And there's cells in your eyeballs, there's cells in your skin, there's cells in your lungs. They really are the core building blocks of the body. And they work just like a kitchen. That's the cool thing. I can't get into the inside of the cell here called the nucleus and just stir things around and create whatever recipes I want. I'm not allowed to. Most of the stuff that we eat, that we take into our bodies to try to help us, kind of stays on that outside edge of the cell, just like I have to stay seated at the nice restaurant. They don't let me go back there and cook my own stuff. So the way that I get what I want out of the kitchen is by signaling it or getting the waiter or waitress to write those things down. Well, there was a doctor who worked back in the 60s. He won a big medal. It's like a rank below the Nobel Prize. This is a bit of he kind of reminds me of like a chipmunk, the way he's half smiling or something in this picture. But his name is Joe McCord. This is a more recent picture, but back in the 60s, he was studying. It took him a long time to discover something that was called basically a big recipe that came out of the kitchen, right? He determined that the cells in the human body have their own mechanisms. You know, the DNA is the tiny little bit. It's like the recipe book in the kitchen. So inside this recipe book that exists in trillions and trillions of places in all of us, there was a recipe in there, and this guy discovered it, Joe. He discovered that the DNA inside of your body has a built-in mechanism to combat the aging process. Your body has a way to slow down aging. And that was huge. It's like a restaurant, this fancy restaurant here came out with, you know, a really nice new dish, and everybody just had to have it. It was the biggest deal. That's what put this guy on the map. It was an amazing discovery. And it's applicable to everybody that breathes air, every animal that breathes air, right? Anything that breathes air. The reason why we get old, here's your fun lesson in old. It's called free radical theory of aging. I'll make this bigger in just a second so you can see what I'm typing. Maybe that big. Oh, even bigger would be better. So the free radical theory of aging. I remember this because if you say old and you spin the letters around, it's really easy to remember, right? But this is how we get old. The old is based on this free radical theory of aging. Free radicals are the exhaust of what happens when our cells do their work. So when your body works, it produces these free radicals kind of as exhaust. That's just from eating, sleeping, breathing, stuff that you would want to be doing, being alive, basically. And as we do that, these things bounce around in our bodies, and there's bazillions of them, a whole bunch of them. And they slowly wear out our cells. It's like having hundreds of thousands of bouncy balls bouncing through your house. They're going to put out the windows and damage the wood and the paint and the flooring, and right, it sort of just slowly wears things out. Well, the body has an ability to combat this. We've known about this theory for a long time, and we call it oxidation sometimes, or oxidative stress. And that's why everything that you buy, that weird kale garbage drink and the my box of cereal in the cupboard here, it has antioxidants. But the problem is that's bringing something else in to try to combat the solution, to try to combat the problem. I'm sorry. That's what I meant to say. That would be like I showed up at this fancy restaurant with my wife, and we get seated, and then rather than order anything, I don't know if you guys have ever seen the movie Sing. This is kind of like a scene from the movie Sing, the cartoon. Instead of ordering anything, we sneak out of her purse a bag of McDonald's, right? Hey, actually, here's my prop. See, I've recently been to McDonald's. So we pull this out and we set it down on the counter, and we eat this cheap cheeseburger when we could be leveraging what this great, amazing recipe is from the kitchen. If we just not try to do it ourselves and let the process that's in place, that's more natural, work. You see, even when we eat things that are grown in a garden, and like the most organic thing you can buy, the most hippie thing you can buy, it's still a foreign substance to our body. But what this guy discovered was that the body could produce its own enzymes. Now, I used to work for a guy, let me go back to go back to just me. I used to work for this guy, that a Chinese professor. So at the same time we're understanding how the cells work back in the 1960s, we're just starting to grasp it. Before you can really influence something and take control of something, you have to understand it. And we're just getting to figure out how the building blocks of the cells work. We've already put somebody on the moon, right? Just think of the complexity there, how complex the body is, figuring out how these things work compared to putting somebody on the moon. So I worked for an awesome professor, one of my favorite mentors, a guy named Heng, Dr. Ban, Chinese guy. And he, speaking of the moon, he had a project on the moon studying moon dust, right? So they'd stick this probe into the dust in the moon. They'd heat it up and they'd measure the properties of that dust. And there were a bunch of things they wanted to see about it. But one of the discoveries that they found was that moon dust is a lot different than Earth dust. Earth dust is wet, and there's air, and there's other things in there. So it kind of doesn't matter how you shape it, the properties of it stay basically the same. But because on the moon it's a vacuum, if you crush it, it acts way differently than if you let it spring out. And you can kind of control how fast it will cool things down or how fast it will transfer heat. Nerdy stuff, you don't care, it's not a big deal. But the point of it was, we had this aha moment when we realized that. I'm sitting in a room, here's my Chinese professor, there's 10 or 12 of us in the room, and when we're talking about this, he's identifying that you can control this property. And what he says really caught me. I thought, oh, that's cool. He said, suddenly he goes, you can dial it. You can dial it. And I'm like, what is he talking about? You can dial it. What he meant was you could control it. You could influence it, right? So now back to our story about DNA and how we control it. This guy discovered that good recipe, right? The best thing that the steakhouse has ever produced. This thing that can literally slow down the rate that our bodies age. That's awesome. Huge, right? Huge impact to the world. But we didn't know how it worked. We didn't know how to signal it. It's like we knew the kitchen could make it. Am I still, where am I sharing? I got to get my screen on here. Am I sharing my screen still? I think I'm not. There we go. So this guy right here, he discovered that, but it's like we didn't know what to tell the waiter, right? It wasn't in the recipe. It wasn't in the menu. And we couldn't dial it. We couldn't control it. We couldn't influence it. And McCord here, Joe McCord, he had this thought that was, what if we could, and he basically dedicated his career to that endeavor. And what he found was certain herbs, when the body sees them in just the right combination, these are herbs out of India, out of China, they've been used for hundreds of years. People know that they're beneficial to the body, but they didn't know why. He discovered that when those are just in the right combination, they crank this up. They produce this really good enzyme, this really healthy thing. And so it became this landmark thing. And that was in 2003. So in 2003, he discovers the way to optimize that signal. In other words, what does that waiter have to scribble down in order to carry that back to the kitchen so they crank out a whole bunch of this stuff? It's like drinks for everyone, right? But this would be superoxide dismutase for everyone. It cranks up that particular enzyme. And I say it just because I learned how, right? I don't know this stuff really. I'm a missile nerd. I don't deal with cells. But 2003, they discover that. It starts getting studied by Harvard. It starts getting studied by Colorado State University, Ohio State University, National Institute of Health, the American Heart Association, Amsterdam. It's going international, right? All these scientists are like, wow, what is this thing? And is the recipe really that good? They were the first nerds to sit at the table and order it or test it out. But in 2005, it made the news. So 2005, just 13 years ago, this thing breaks big. There's all these national news outfits that start talking about it, start looking into it. One of them in particular does an investigative report because they thought it was a hoax. So they show up, and what they found basically is that it works. Actually, on the news anchor, it worked faster than all the studies had shown. So in his particular case, it worked really, really well. Anyway, in 2005, that's what happened. And you might think like, wow, well, the company that patented that and this guy, they must be like the next Elon Musk or the next Mark Zuckerberg richer than everybody. And because this literally has the ability to slow down the rate by which our cells age. And everything that's associated with getting old, all of the disease states, all of the problems that come with that, that are based on this free radical damage or that oxidative stress, all of those things can now be dialed back down, right? Remember that Chinese professor? Oh, we can dial it. So they could be dialed back down. The trick is, though, and here's the catch, and I might just end the story here. I think I probably should. I've been going for a little bit longer than I thought. Nobody bought it. Nobody wanted it. The company that patented it, that owned it, that was ahead of everyone, making all these breakthroughs in here, basically the genius chef in that restaurant, couldn't sell their wares. They couldn't sell this. And the reason why is because nobody knew what this was. So right now, this market, this was in 2014. I'll put this, I'll skip that part of the story, the 2009 part of the story. But in 2014, there was a market analysis that said that this market alone would be worth $17.3 billion. That's with a B. $1 billion by the year 2023. So within 9 years. And right now, most people don't know what you've just seen me blab about in a small little video clip that I'm sharing on YouTube or Facebook or whatever. I'm not sure where I'll put this yet. And that's the story. The story is that we figured out how to dial our own DNA and what they produce. There's been other things that they've discovered too, not just the aging, but about energy, about sharpening the mind and focus. This is something that CEOs and professional athletes use because they always want the latest cutting edge to get that little bit ahead of their competition. But most nobody knows about it. Everybody is still taking this into the steakhouse. That's the crazy thing. Everybody's still taking this into the steakhouse. And you don't have to. We know what to ask the waiter. We know what to ask the waitress for. And that's the cool thing about this. You can begin to take control of your own biology. You can begin to, they call it biohacking. You're taking control of your own DNA. I'm not putting some weird foreign thing in my body. I'm just turning up the signal that my body already knows how to do, the most natural way to combat these problems. And the more recipes that they discover, the more exciting it gets. But again, this is a huge market that almost nobody knows about right now. It's been 4 years since that market study happened. The leading companies are not even close to $1 billion, not even close to $500 million. And yet there's tons of headroom. So it's a really exciting part of the market. That's why I'm always posting stuff about it. If you want to learn more about it, you can join our little Facebook page where we like to tell stories about those effects. I'll just show you, I think this is Biohacking Adventurers. Go into Facebook and I can add you to that group if you want to keep hearing this story. I don't want anyone to feel pressured that they have to do anything, but now that you know, you at least have the option to not take this into the steakhouse. And I would recommend that you figure out what else is on the menu. So thanks for letting me tell a little story, and hopefully you have a greater appreciation for storytelling like Hemingway did. And hopefully you have a greater appreciation for this huge trend that's about to take over the world called biohacking. We'll use that name for it for now. Any other questions or thoughts that you have, reach out to me. I can post this video, you can comment on it, and we'll continue the discussion from there. There's a lot more to the story than what I can share in a short little bit. But thanks for your time. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now, and we will carry on. Let's see if I can make sure that I stop this correctly. Let me at least get to my big face again. I'll stop the recording and we'll carry it on from there. Thanks for those that joined in and logged in. Thanks to all those that will see this later on, because there's typically a couple hundred people that see this in about a week. And I'm excited to get this story out. If there's something that you think I can do better when I tell the story, or it was too confusing, or why did you ramble about lunar dust for so long, or you're losing your mind, or your bald spot looks bad, whatever it is, let me know and help me get better at this, because it's something that is really making a difference. Again, I'll end with this. It's a fun way to run a business, and there's a lot of fun people I get to work with. Some of them are here supporting me now online, and some of them will see this later. But this was cool to me. This was a realization that, hey, we can be successful. I've been running this business for about 10, 11 months, and it's been in the black for a while. I didn't know that I would ever be able to do that, but it's exciting. And so here I am reading books to get better at it, So thanks for your time. I'll end the recording now, and we can keep chatting online.